The next for the introduction speeches to the Arab Israeli journalist Yosef Haddad now has the floor for an impulse statement as the CEO of the association Together Watch for Each Other. Mr. Haddad works on bringing the Arab community closer to wider Israeli society and has become a powerful voice since October the 7th. The floor is yours.
President of the Austrian National Council, members of the parliament from across European nations, members of the European Parliament, members of Knesset, all distinguished guests, shalom, marhaba, hello. My name is Yosef Haddad, and it is an honor to be here with you today as a proud Israeli citizen, as a proud Arab Israeli citizen of the State of Israel. I was born in Haifa, the largest mixed city in Israel, and raised in Nazareth, the largest Arab city in Israel. Growing up, I fell in love with playing football, and doing so in the largest mixed city led to my close friendship with children of all backgrounds. It was when I turned 18, after seeing all my Jewish and Druze friends drafted into the army, that I chose to follow their footsteps, despite the fact that it wasn't mandatory for me as an Arab citizen of Israel, even though I have equal rights, just not equal obligation. But I'm an Israeli, and Israel is my country, so I enlisted to protect my country and my society. I served in the Golani Combat Unit and later became a commander. Yes, I, the Arab, was an IDF commander over Jewish soldiers. My service ended painfully after I fought in the Second Lebanon War and was gravely injured after Hezbollah grenade missile was fired at me and nearly missed. My foot was severed, I had shrapnel all over my body, and I was evacuated shortly after the explosion by my fellow soldiers, Jewish soldiers, who risked their lives to save me, an Arab. At the hospital, it was Israeli doctors, both Arabs and Jews, who were miraculously able to reattach my foot and save my life. Tragically, in the same war against the barbaric terror group Hezbollah, I lost many friends, soldiers, and 3 of my commanders. The same Hezbollah which fired at me and killed my brothers who fought beside me is attacking Israel without end. But before I get to the current war, we have to have an honest conversation about what life is really like for an Arab citizen of Israel, which some organizations with political agendas have falsified claimed that Israel is an apartheid state. So in the apartheid state of Israel, 30% of the doctors and 50% of the pharmacists are Arabs, when we make up 20% of the population. In the apartheid state of Israel, Arab Israelis serve in the Knesset and are ministers. They are IDF commanders. They are leading journalists and academics. They are professional athletes who represent Israel in the international states. They are popular musicians and even Supreme Court justice, like for instance Salim Jubran, who put a Jewish president and a Jewish prime minister in jail for crimes they have committed. Sadly, Arab Israelis also suffer from the plague of terrorism, and yes, even anti-Semitism. When Hamas fire rockets at Israelis, do you think that their missiles check if the target is an Arab or a Jew? Do you know that nearly half of the civilians casualties in northern Israel in the Second Lebanon War were Arab Israelis? Or that Arab Israelis were murdered in Hamas suicide attacks in the Second Intifada, such as the Maxim restaurant bombing? By the way, the Maxim restaurant is a co-owned by Arabs and Jews. The people go there, who eat there, are Arabs and Jews. Who work there, Arabs and Jews. The tragic result is 21 Israelis were killed, Arabs and Jews. Over 50 were injured, Arabs and Jews. Or that the only injury from Iran's attack on Israel in April was an Arab Israeli little girl from the south. Or that a Hezbollah rocket murdered 12 Arab children playing soccer in the Druze village of Majd al-Shams. Did you know that Arab Israelis were slaughtered in cold blood by Hamas terrorists on October 7? And taken hostage into Gaza, where they are still held even today. We are an integral part of our country. And when our country bleeds, we bleed. Many of us are proud to be Arab and proud to be Israeli. We help shape the country's future as democratic and Jewish state, which brings us to the day. Make no mistake, this conflict is not between Arabs and Jews. It's not even about land. It has everything to do with the obsessive genocidal supremacist ideology steeped in anti-Semitism that seeks to eliminate the state of Israel, the United States, and yes, Europe as well. So what is this ideology? What is Hamas really? Hamas is a terrorist organization ruling the Gaza Strip, funded by Iran and Qatar. They pride itself on armed resistance against Israel and reject our right to exist in any borders. Even prior to October 7th, Hamas fired tens of thousands of rockets at civilians in southern Israel, each and every one a war crime. They launched a second intifada in the early 2000s, a wave of suicide bombing and other terror attacks responsible for the death of hundreds of Israelis, Arabs and Jews, including children. Since then, Israel was forced to enact a joint Egyptian-Israeli blockade for the security of both states, and even unilaterally withdrew from Gaza entirely, both military and civilly, in 2005, meaning that on October 7, there was not a single Israeli in Gaza, with the exception, of the kidnapped hostages that had already been in holding, such as Avera Mengistu from the Ethiopian community and Hisham al-Said from the Arab community. There was no war in Gaza on October 7. There were no IDF airstrikes or raids. No Palestinians were being harmed by Israel. Some of them even had permits to work in Israel. Yet Hamas premeditated for months to carry out a savage terror attack, kidnapping, murdering, and raping innocent Israelis of all ages. Both Arabs and Jews from the Nova Musical Festival and Gaza border communities. 1,200 killed, over 200 kidnapped from their homes on a Jewish holiday, no less. A massacre carried out by Hamas commandos as well as Palestinian civilians, including journalists, teachers, and other UN employees, all of which they filmed and posted themselves across social networks. You can see it because they posted it. You know, throughout this war, Hamas have falsified casualty numbers, excluding combatants in their figures, and claiming that children aged 14 to 17, whom they recruited to Hamas, are non-combatants. There's only one description for this behavior: child abuse. For example, when Islamic Jihad misfired a rocket and hit the Al Ahli hospital, Hamas immediately claimed 500 had been killed in an Israeli strike at the hospital. Several hours later, it was revealed that it was a rocket from the Palestinian terrorists that fell short and landed in the parking lot of the hospital. 40 to 50 were killed. But Hamas does more than lie. They cynically exploit their own people, repeatedly fired rockets from their humanitarian zone, shooting and beating Gazans who follow IDF instructions to get to safety, stealing aid and reselling it at an obscene price, and barbarically pursuing any Gazans who criticize Hamas, and there are footage of it, and using civilians, especially children, as human shields. For 11 months, they have used innocent human beings, among them Israeli Arabs and Jews, babies and elderly, women and men, as pawns in their terrorism, while manipulating the public about what is really happening on the ground and brutally oppressing their own people. One of those hostages is an Austrian citizen himself, Tal Shoham. 3 members of his family were killed on October 7. 7 kidnapped. Today, 6 of them were released, but Tal remains in captivity. Hamas kidnapped and is holding European citizens in dungeon underground in an inhumane condition. And instead of a unified demand, pressuring Hamas we see many European voices criticize Israel instead of having our back, doing diplomatically what Israel can't do alone. Force Hamas to surrender the hostages immediately and hold Hamas enablers accountable from Turkey to Qatar to Iran. While committing unspeakable crimes against the Palestinian people and Israelis, Hamas has cried victim in the international community, playing on the goodwill of the Western world and spewing disinformation with false justification of heinous crimes they are committing against both sides. This effort to subvert the truth has been alarmingly effective, with irresponsible use of language to intentionally smear the just war in Gaza as genocide. It has also directly led to rampant anti-Semitism globally. The reason for this is that this war isn't against only Israel. They are waging war against your values as well. And I'm concluding. Despite the reality on the ground in Gaza, the international media continues to echo Hamas statistics and Hamas narrative as it's factual, irresponsibly adding fuel to the fire of anti-Semitism that are raging across Europe. Even Hamas has admitted that they're using their own people for human shields and using schools, mosques, and hospitals for terror activities. They have admitted their crimes and documented them themselves. Yet some European nations compare our self-defense with the crimes committed by our attackers. Instead of holding international bodies like UNRWA accountable for their complicity with Hamas, with multiple employees even taking part in October 7 attacks and numerous schools being used by Hamas for terror activities, many EU nations, which initially paused fundings to UNRWA over the scandal, have now restored fundings. You are funding Hamas when you are funding UNRWA. Do you understand this? It is deeply concerning that so many European nations will turn their backs on their own values in the halls of bodies like the UN and condemn Israel's self-defense while ignoring completely Hamas at a time when hostages need pressure on Hamas more than anything. Sadly, Europe is failing to focus on the humanity of the hostages, even some of your own citizens, and instead made this a political issue. As lawmakers, as leaders, as human beings, I urge you to take a firmer stand against the rise of terrorist organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and other terror proxies of Iran. Not only for the sake of the Jewish and democratic state of Israel, but for the sake of the future of the European civilization. It is undeniable that European values and ideas have given rise to the advancement and betterment of civilization and the protection of human rights over the course of human history. The revolutionary idea of civil liberty for all, coupled with tolerance and the pursuit of equality, are rooted in the European tradition. If we care about the ideals of freedom and democracy, if we cherish our way of life rooted in shared Judeo-Christian values, now is the time to make a stand against the attacks on Israel, both on and off the battlefield, that empower our shared enemies. Toda, shukran, thank you.